"Do you have any stale bread for my son?" she begged, but the millionaire behind her saw and Sarah was holding the baby tightly while her tears fell silently on the cold supermarket floor. She hadn't eaten anything solid in 3 days, and her breast milk had dried up completely due to stress and lack of proper nutrition. That's when she approached the bakery counter, where a young employee was arranging bread with an unfriendly look. Sarah took a deep breath, swallowed what little pride she had left, and asked the question she never imagined would come out of her mouth. "Please, do you have any stale bread?" "It's for my son," she whispered, gently rocking the softly crying baby. The employee, Brittany, looked up, annoyed. It was Wednesday mid-afternoon, and she was tired of dealing with people complaining about the price of everything. "We don't have anything expired here, and even if we did, we can't give it away," she replied curtly without really looking at Sarah. I can pay something. It doesn't have to be free, any bread, even the cheapest kind," Sarah insisted, trying to control her voice, which threatened to break. Brittany finally looked at her properly. She saw the thin baby in her arms, the mother's worn-out clothes, the eyes red from so much crying. But she hardened her heart. It wasn't her problem. "Look, I already said we don't have anything. If you're not going to buy anything, get out of the line. There are people waiting," she said, pointing behind Sarah. Behind her in the meat line, a man in a navy blue suit watched everything in silence. Robert Sterling was 42 and had just come from an important business meeting. He was there just to buy a quick snack before returning to the office, but something about the scene deeply bothered him. "Please, I'm begging you," Sarah tried again, her voice even lower. "My son hasn't eaten in over a day. I can pay $10 for anything, it's all I have." Brittany sighed, irritated. Other customers were starting to complain about the delay. "Listen here, I already said I can't do anything. You'll have to leave or I'll call management." That's when the baby let out a louder, desperate cry. Sarah began to cry too, trying to calm the child. The man in the suit took a step forward but still said nothing. "For God's sake, it's just a piece of bread," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to the employee. "And where do you live? How did you get here?" Brittany asked, suspicion in her voice. I'm living in a friend's borrowed car, out there in the parking lot," Sarah confessed, ashamed. The revelation made Robert stop completely what he was doing. He looked through the window and saw an old, beat-up compact car parked outside. "In the car? With a child?" Brittany asked, incredulous. "For 2 weeks. I lost my apartment because I couldn't pay the rent after I was laid off," Sarah explained, the tears falling harder now. "And this child's father, where is he?" Brittany insisted. Sarah lowered her head, humiliated. He ran off when he found out I was pregnant. I never saw him again." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. There was something about that story that touched him strangely, as if it were all too familiar. "Have you come here other times asking for this?" Brittany questioned. "Not here specifically, but I've been to other markets in the area. They all sent me away," Sarah admitted. "So you just go around begging with this child?" Brittany said now with a judgmental tone. "It's not begging. I'm offering to pay." Sarah defended herself. With a thread of dignity she still had left. The market manager, Mrs. Gable, appeared, drawn by the commotion. She was a woman in her 50s, strict and known for having no patience with complicated situations. "What's the problem here?" she asked, looking from Brittany to Sarah. "This woman is asking for stale bread and holding up the line," Brittany explained. "Mrs. Gable looked Sarah up and down, examining her worn-out clothes, the baby in her arms, her tired appearance. "Ma'am, this is a supermarket, not a social services office. If you're not going to buy anything, you need to leave," she said firmly. "I want to buy. I have money," Sarah protested, pulling a crumpled $10 bill from her pocket. $10 won't even buy half a loaf of bread here," Mrs. Gable replied. "And even if it did, we can't have you disturbing other customers." Robert finally approached. There was something in Sarah's voice, in the way she spoke, that was bothering him beyond the situation itself. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Mrs. Gable. "What would be the problem if she bought something with the money she has?" The 3 women looked at him, surprised. Mrs. Gable immediately changed her tone upon seeing Robert's expensive suit and the gold watch on his wrist. "There's no problem at all, sir. But she's causing a disturbance, insisting on products we don't have available," she explained, trying to sound professional. "I see," Robert said, looking directly at Sarah. "And what's the price of the cheapest bread you have?" $15 for the smallest package, Brittany answered, still confused by the intervention. "I'll pay the difference," Robert offered, taking out his wallet. "No!" Sarah reacted immediately. "I don't want charity. I just wanted a chance to buy something I could afford." The refusal surprised everyone. Robert studied her face more carefully and felt a strange shiver run down his spine. "It's not charity. Consider it a loan," he tried. "I don't know you." "I can't accept," Sarah insisted, with a dignity that even impressed Mrs. Gable. "Look here," Mrs. Gable interjected impatiently. "Either you accept the gentleman's help and settle this quickly, or I'll have to call security." The baby started crying louder, and Sarah tried to calm him, rocking him gently. It was then that Robert noticed a small but visible scar on her right forearm. His heart raced. He had an almost identical scar in the same place. "Sorry for asking, but how did you get that scar?" Robert pointed discreetly. Sarah looked at her own arm, confused. It was when I was little. An accident with boiling water," she replied, not understanding why he wanted to know. "What kind of accident?" he insisted. Sarah hesitated. She didn't like talking about the past, especially that part. "I lived in a children's institution. The cook accidentally spilled hot water," she explained quickly. Robert turned pale. He had also been burned at age 7, exactly the same way, at the same institution. "Which institution?" he asked, his voice coming out softer. "The Riverside Children's Center, right here in New York City. But that was a long time ago," Sarah answered, finding the question strange. "I lived there too," Robert said, almost whispering. The silence that followed was broken only by the baby's crying. Sarah looked at him more closely for the first time. "What do you mean you lived there too?" she asked. "From 1988 to 1993. I was between 7 and 12 years old," Robert explained. "I was there from 1985 to 1992, Sarah calculated. "Did we know each other?" Before Robert could answer, Mrs. Gable lost her patience. "Look, this conversation is very interesting, but you can't stand here disrupting the flow. Decide what you're going to do right now," she said, crossing her arms. "Let's get out of here," Robert suggested. "We can talk better outside." Sarah looked at the baby, who was still crying, then at the $10 in her hand. "I need something for him to eat first," she said, desperate. Robert looked at Brittany. "Sell me a package of bread and a bottle of milk, I'll pay," he said, placing a $50 bill on the counter. "I already said I don't want charity," Sarah protested. "It's not charity, it's from someone who understands what you're going through," Robert explained, with a gentleness in his voice she hadn't expected. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something sincere, something that made her hesitate. The baby kept crying, and she knew she didn't have many options. "I'll pay back every cent," she said, finally accepting. "You don't have to," Robert replied, "but I'll take your word for it." Brittany, still confused by the whole situation, grabbed a package of bread and a bottle of milk, handing them to Sarah along with the change. "Thank you," Sarah murmured, more to Robert than to the employee. "Now let's get out of here before Mrs. Gable really does call security," Robert suggested, half smiling. The two left the supermarket in silence. Sarah went straight to the beat-up compact car, where she improvised some milk for the baby with the water she had in a bottle. Robert watched her, noticing the details. A worn-out baby blanket on the back seat, some clothes piled up, a small bag with the child's things. "How long have you been living like this?" he asked without judgment. 3 weeks, Sarah answered, giving the milk to the baby, who finally stopped crying. "And before that?" "I had a small apartment in the Bronx. Rent was $500, but when I got fired I couldn't pay it anymore," she explained, avoiding looking directly at him. "Where were you fired from?" "A private school. I was a math teacher," Sarah said, with a tone of pride mixed with sadness. "A teacher?" Robert was surprised. "And why were you fired?" Sarah sighed, knowing she'd have to explain the whole story. I had a complicated pregnancy. I had to miss a lot of work in the last trimester. The principal said she couldn't keep an unstable employee, she recounted, still hurt by the injustice. Robert shook his head, upset. And the baby's father? Are you sure he's not coming back? He asked delicately. He made it very clear he didn't want any responsibility. When I told him I was pregnant, he said the problem was mine alone, Sarah replied with bitterness. How old are you? Robert asked. 34. He did some mental math. If she was in the orphanage from 1985 to 1992 and was 34 now, then she would have been born in 1989 or 1990. Do you remember anything else about the Riverside Children's Center? He asked. I remember a lot. Why? Sarah replied, curious. Do you remember a younger boy, dark hair, who liked to draw? Robert tried. Sarah thought for a moment. I remember several boys. You draw? She asked. I used to. Now I work with other things, Robert said. But you had a special way with numbers, even as a little girl. How do you know that? Sarah asked, surprised. Because I remember you, Robert said with a sad smile. You helped me with math several times. The memory began to return to Sarah, a small, shy boy who always came to ask for help with his homework. Robert, she said, disbelieving. Robbie? That's right, he confirmed. Sarah looked at him again, trying to see the boy she knew in the figure of the successful man before her. My God, what happened to you? How did you manage to get out of that life? She asked. It was a long journey, Robert said. And you? How did you leave the orphanage? I stayed until I was 18. After that, I tried to make it on my own, Sarah told him. I managed to finish my studies, got a scholarship for a math degree, became a teacher. I was doing well until... She looked at the baby. Until life got complicated again, Robert finished. Exactly. They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. And you, Robbie? What do you do for a living? Sarah asked. Businessman, Robert said simply. What kind of business? Technology. We develop apps, he explained, without going into details. Must be going well, Sarah observed, looking at the expensive suit. It is, Robert confirmed. But it wasn't always like this. How so? Robert looked at the sky, which was beginning to darken. When I left the children's center at 12, I went to a foster family. It didn't work out. By 14, I was on the streets, he recounted. On the streets. For 2 years, slept where I could, ate what I could find. Until a guy gave me a chance, Robert said. What kind of chance? Work at an internet cafe. Cleaning, organizing, simple stuff. But I'd watch people using the computers, he explained. Started teaching myself. And then? Then I managed to study at night, work during the day, did a technical course, then college. At 25, I created my first app. Robert summarized years of struggle in a few words. Wow, Sarah said, impressed. And now? Now I have a company with 40 employees and revenue of a few million a year, he said, without arrogance. Sarah looked at him, then at her own situation, and felt a mix of admiration and sadness. You made it. You got out of there and made a success of your life, she said. And you can too, Robert stated. I don't know. It seems like every time things get a little better, something happens to knock me down again, Sarah vented. I can help you, Robert offered. You already have. Thanks for the milk and the bread, Sarah replied. Not that. I can give you a job, he said. Sarah looked at him, suspicious. What kind of job? At my company. You're a math teacher, right? Our apps are focused on education. We need people who understand the subject, Robert explained. I don't know if that would be a good idea, Sarah hesitated. Why not? Because I don't understand anything about technology. And look at my situation. I don't even have proper clothes for work, she said, pointing to her own attire. Those are details we can work out. The question is, do you want an opportunity? Robert asked directly. Sarah looked at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully after feeding. I do, but... she began. But what? But I don't want you to do this just out of pity, or because we knew each other in the past, she said firmly. It's not pity, Robert assured. It's opportunity. Mine to get an experienced employee, yours for a fresh start. And the baby? Sarah asked. The company has a daycare, Robert said. Has daycare? Yes, I implemented it 2 years ago, when an employee almost quit because she had nowhere to leave her son, he explained. Sarah fell silent, thinking about the possibilities. What exactly would my job be, she asked. Review educational content, create exercises, test the app's usability from a pedagogical perspective, Robert explained. Things you know how to do. And the salary? $3,000 to start. If it works out, we increase it, he offered. $3,000 was almost 6 times more than Sarah earned as a teacher. She couldn't hide her surprise. 3,000? She repeated. Is it too little? Robert asked. It's a lot. A whole lot, she replied, emotional. So do you accept? Sarah looked again at the baby, then at the car where she was living, then at Robert. I accept, she said with tears in her eyes. Great. Can you start Monday? Robert asked. I can, but where will I live until then? Sarah asked, embarrassed. I know a simple hotel near the company. I'll cover the expenses until you get your first paycheck, Robert offered. Robert, I can't accept so much help, Sarah protested. It's not help. It's an investment, he said, smiling, in an employee who will add value to my company. Sarah couldn't hold back the tears. For the first time in months, she felt there was hope. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me. Actually, I'm the one who should be thanking you, Robert said. How so? You helped me so much when we were kids. Now it's my turn to return the favor, he explained. At that moment, Brittany came out of the supermarket to get something from the car and saw the two still talking in the parking lot. Curious about how the story ended, she discreetly approached. Sorry, she said, a bit awkwardly. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened in there. Sarah and Robert looked at her. I wanted to apologize, Brittany continued, addressing Sarah. I shouldn't have treated you that way. It's okay, Sarah replied. You were working. That's no excuse, Brittany insisted. I have a little girl too. If it were me, I'd want someone to treat me with more humanity. How old is your daughter? Sarah asked. 2 years old, Brittany answered. What's her name? Lily. And your son? Brittany asked. Ethan, Sarah said, smiling for the first time. Ethan is a beautiful name, Brittany complimented. Can I ask what you decided? I saw you'd been talking for a while. Robert and Sarah exchanged a look. Actually, Robert said, we discovered we've known each other for a very long time. Really? Brittany asked, curious. We grew up in the same children's home, Sarah explained. Wow, what an amazing coincidence, Brittany exclaimed. And he offered me a job, Sarah added. That's so great, Brittany said, genuinely happy. See? Things have a way of working out when you least expect it. It's true, Sarah agreed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. You know what's funny? Brittany said. I almost gave you some bread hidden from Mrs. Gable, but I was afraid of getting fired. Really? Sarah asked. Really? My heart broke seeing you beg like that, Brittany confessed. But I need the job, you know. I'm a single mom too. I understand perfectly, Sarah said. I don't judge you. Still, I feel bad, Brittany admitted. Don't, Robert interjected. You were following the rules, and in the end, everything worked out. That's true, Brittany agreed. Sometimes things happen the way they're supposed to. Speaking of which, Robert said, checking his watch, it's getting late. I'll take you to the hotel I mentioned. Can I come along? Brittany asked impulsively. I mean, just to make sure everything's okay. I still feel responsible for everything. Of course, Sarah said, but you don't need to feel responsible for anything. Even so, I want to see you settled in, Brittany insisted. The three went to Robert's car, a black high-end luxury sedan that Sarah looked at with discreet admiration. On the way, Brittany asked many questions about the reunion and life at the children's home. What was life like there? she asked. Hard, Robert answered. But Sarah made everything easier for those who needed help. How so? Brittany wanted to know. She helped everyone with their schoolwork. She was very smart, Robert explained. I wasn't, Sarah protested, embarrassed. Yes, you were. You taught me my multiplication tables when I was 8, Robert recalled. I just liked math, Sarah said. And you still do? Brittany asked. Very much. That's why I became a teacher, Sarah replied. Then you must be good at what you do, Brittany observed. I was, Sarah said with nostalgia. You still are, Robert corrected. It's just that now you'll have a better environment to work in. They arrived at the hotel Robert had mentioned. It was simple but clean and cozy. He paid for a week in advance and went up with Sarah to see the room. Is this okay? He asked. Sarah looked around. It was small, but it had a double bed, a crib the manager quickly provided, a clean bathroom, and a small refrigerator. It's perfect, she said, emotional. Better than anywhere I've slept in the last few weeks. Great, Robert said. Tomorrow I'll stop by to take you to see the company. How does 10 in the morning sound? Perfect, Sarah agreed. And do you need anything for today? Diapers, food? He asked. I think I'm okay for today, Sarah said. You've already done too much. I haven't done anything too much, Robert insisted. I just did what any decent person would do. Not every decent person would do this, Sarah said, looking at Brittany. That's true, Brittany admitted. I myself didn't do it. But you wanted to, Sarah said, and that already counts for a lot. After Robert and Brittany left, Sarah bathed the baby, fed him again, and lay down in a real bed for the first time in weeks. Ethan slept peacefully, and she stayed awake for a while, still not believing the sudden change in her life. The next day, Robert arrived promptly at 10. Sarah was dressed in the best clothes she had, but she was still far from looking like an executive. Good morning, he greeted. Sleep well. Better than I have in a long time, Sarah replied, smiling. And Ethan? Slept through the night. I think he sensed we were safe, she said. On the way to the company, Robert explained more details about the job and the company. We mainly develop educational apps for public school, he said. The idea is to democratize access to quality education. What kind of apps? Sarah asked. Math, language arts, science. Practical things teachers can use in the classroom, Robert explained. The problem is we often create things that are too technical, that don't work in practice. That's why you need a teacher, Sarah understood. Exactly. Someone who's already been through the real experience of trying to teach math to a class of 40 students in a school with no resources, Robert said. That was my daily life, Sarah confirmed. That's why you're the ideal person, he said. They arrived at a modern commercial building in the Upper East Side. The company occupied an entire floor on the 8th level. Sarah was impressed with the environment, open spaces, modern computers, a room with toys that was clearly the daycare. Wow, she said, looking around. Do you like it? Robert asked. It's incredible. I never imagined I'd one day work in a place like this, Sarah confessed. Well, now you will, Robert said, smiling. He introduced Sarah to some employees. Everyone was friendly, but she noticed some curious looks, probably due to her simple clothes contrasting with the sophisticated environment. Everyone, Robert announced to the team, this is Sarah, our new educational consultant. She's a math teacher and will help us make our products more practical and effective. Cool, said a young woman. Where are you from, Sarah? I worked at a private school, Sarah replied, without going into details. Which school? The woman insisted. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to expose her whole situation on the first day. The Heights Preparatory School, she said, the name of the last school where she worked. I know it, the woman said. It's a good school. Yes, it is, Sarah agreed. Robert showed Sarah the workstation that would be hers, introduced the apps the company developed, and explained in detail what her responsibilities would be. You'll start by analyzing our elementary school math app, he said. Test everything, see what works, what doesn't, and suggest improvements. How will I test it? Sarah asked. Use your experience. Imagine you're preparing a lesson, or you have to explain a concept to a student who's struggling, Robert suggested. If the app would help or hinder. I understand, Sarah said. If you have any questions, just ask. My office is right there. Robert pointed to a room with glass walls. Sarah spent the first day exploring the apps and taking notes. They were well made, technically, but she immediately identified several problems from a pedagogical standpoint. Overly complicated language, exercises that didn't follow a logical progression, a lack of adequate feedback for student errors. At the end of the day, she organized her observations into a report she handed to Robert. Wow, he said after reading it. You identified problems we never noticed. It's because you think like programmers, not like teachers, Sarah explained. The two perspectives are different. For example, Robert asked, you placed fraction exercises right after basic addition, but a child needs to master addition very well before understanding fractions, Sarah explained. It's like teaching someone to run before teaching them to walk. That makes sense, Robert agreed. And how would you fix that? By creating a mapping of the necessary skills for each topic and ensuring one is only introduced after the previous one is solidified, Sarah suggested. That's brilliant, Robert said. Why didn't anyone here think of that? Because you've never had to teach an 8-year-old who doesn't even know how to do subtraction, Sarah said, smiling. True, Robert admitted. Can you develop this idea? I can. It will take some time, but I can create a complete mapping, Sarah offered. Perfect. You can start tomorrow, Robert said. As she was leaving, Sarah stopped by the daycare to pick up Ethan. He was playing with other children and seemed happy. How was his behavior? She asked the caregiver. An angel, the woman replied. He napped on schedule, ate well, played with everyone. That's good, Sarah said, relieved. Back at the hotel, she gave Ethan dinner and reflected on the first day. It was strange to think that 24 hours ago she was begging for stale bread, and now she had a job, a future prospect, a place to live. The next morning, Brittany appeared at the hotel door with a bag in her hand. Hi, she said, a bit awkwardly. Can I come in? Of course, Sarah said, surprised. How did you know where I was? I asked Robert yesterday. He gave me the address, Brittany explained, entering the room. Did something happen? Sarah asked, worried. No, I just brought you some things, Brittany said, handing over the bag. Sarah opened it and found some women's clothes, apparently new. Brittany, what is this? She asked. Some clothes I bought for you, Brittany said, embarrassed. I thought you might need them for work. You bought clothes for me? Sarah asked, moved. It's just, yesterday when I left here, I kept thinking about the situation, and I remembered how hard it is to start a new job without anything to wear, Brittany explained. Sarah looked at the clothes. They were simple, but nice and suitable for an office. Brittany, I don't know what to say, she began. You don't need to say anything. Just accept it, Brittany interrupted. How much did it cost? I'll pay you back as soon as I get paid, Sarah promised. You're not paying anything, Brittany said firmly. It's a gift. But, no buts. It's my way of apologizing for yesterday, Brittany insisted. Brittany, you have no obligation to do this, Sarah said. I know, but I want to, Brittany replied. You know why? Why? Because when I looked at you yesterday, I saw myself 3 years ago, Brittany confessed. What do you mean? Sarah asked. When Lily was born, I went through a tough time too. Her father abandoned me. I had no money. I was living at my aunt's house as a favor, Brittany recounted. If it weren't for the help of some people, I don't know what would have become of the two of us. And how did you manage to get out of that situation? Work. A lot of work. And the luck of finding good people along the way, Brittany said. Like how you found Robert. That's true, Sarah agreed. So now it's my turn to be one of those good people for someone, Brittany finished. Sarah felt her eyes well up. Thank you, she said, hugging Brittany. Really? You're welcome, Brittany replied, returning the hug. Want to have some coffee? Sarah offered. I do, Brittany accepted. While having coffee, Brittany told more of her story. She was from a small town in the countryside, had moved to New York City at 19 looking for opportunities. She met Lily's father, fell in love, got pregnant, and was abandoned. It was very hard at first, she confessed. "But today I see it was the best thing that happened." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because it made me grow. It made me discover I'm stronger than I imagined," Brittany explained. "And you'll discover the same thing." "I hope so," Sarah said. "Don't hope. I'm sure," Brittany stated. "I saw the strength you had yesterday. Not just anyone begs for food for their child with so much dignity." "I didn't feel dignified at all," Sarah admitted. "But you were being. Dignity isn't about never needing help. It's about accepting help when you need it and helping when you can," Brittany philosophized. "I never thought of it that way," Sarah said. "Well, you should," Brittany replied. When she arrived at the company, Sarah was wearing one of the outfits Brittany had given her, black dress pants and a navy blue blouse. The difference in how people looked at her was noticeable. "Wow, Sarah," said the young woman who had asked about her previous school. "You look beautiful today." "Thank you," Sarah replied, smiling. Robert also noticed the change when he saw her. "You look like an executive," he complimented. "Brittany gave me some clothes," Sarah explained. "The supermarket employee?" Robert asked, surprised. "The very one. She showed up at the hotel this morning with a bag full of clothes," Sarah told him. "What a beautiful gesture," Robert said. "Sometimes the simplest people have the biggest hearts." "True," Sarah agreed. During the second day of work, Sarah began developing the skills mapping she had suggested. It was meticulous work, requiring her to remember all her experience as a teacher and organize the knowledge in a logical and progressive way. In the middle of the afternoon, Robert called her into his office. "How's the work going?" he asked. "Well, it's more complex than I imagined, but I'm enjoying it," Sarah replied. "Which part is being the most complex?" "Organizing everything so it makes sense for both the children and the teachers," Sarah explained. "Each child learns differently, and each teacher has their own methodology." "How do you intend to solve that?" Robert asked, interested. "By creating different paths to reach the same objective," Sarah suggested. "If a child doesn't understand fractions through drawings, they might understand through concrete objects, for example." "That would make the app much more complex," Robert observed. "More complex to program but simpler to use," Sarah corrected. "The app would automatically decide which path to use based on how the child responds to the exercises." Robert was silent for a moment, processing the idea. "That's brilliant," he said finally. "I think so," Sarah asked, unsure. "I do. In fact, it's revolutionary," Robert affirmed. "We're talking about artificial intelligence applied to personalized education." "I don't know if it's that complicated," Sarah said. "It's just good pedagogical sense." "Which is exactly what we needed," Robert admitted. "Sarah, are you sure you only want to earn $3,000? "Why?" she asked, confused. "Because with ideas like that, you should earn much more," Robert said. "Robert, you're already doing so much for me," Sarah protested. "No, I'm doing too little." "You're worth much more than what I offered," he insisted. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Starting next month, your salary goes up to $5,000, Robert decided. $5,000? Sarah repeated, incredulous. "And if your ideas work out, we'll talk about a profit share in the company," Robert added. Sarah was speechless. She never imagined she would earn that much money in her entire life. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Don't say anything, just keep doing the excellent work you're doing," Robert requested. That night, Sarah called Brittany to share the news. $5,000? Brittany shouted on the phone. "Oh my gosh, that's wonderful." "I still can't believe it," Sarah confessed. "Yes, you can. You deserve it," Brittany affirmed. "I always knew you were special." "How did you know?" "We just met yesterday." Sarah laughed. "Sometimes you just know these things," Brittany said mysteriously. "Woman's intuition." "Brittany," Sarah said, changing the subject, "I want to make you a proposal." "What proposal?" "When I get my first paycheck, I want to pay you back for the clothes, and I want to take you out to dinner somewhere nice, you and Lily," Sarah offered. "You don't have to pay me for the clothes," Brittany protested. "Yes, I do. And will you accept the dinner?" Sarah insisted. "I'll accept the dinner," Brittany conceded. "But the clothes were a gift." "We'll discuss that later," Sarah said, smiling. The following week, Sarah was fully adapted to the work routine. She always arrived punctually, took Ethan to daycare, worked focused on developing the mappings, picked up her son at the end of the day and returned to the hotel. It was then that Robert approached her with a different proposal. "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" he said, entering her workstation. "Of course," she replied. "Would you like to present your ideas to our development team?" he asked. "What do you mean?" Sarah didn't understand. "Give a formal presentation. Explain your methodology to everyone," Robert explained. "Me?" Sarah asked, nervous. "I don't know if I'm the right person for that." "You are exactly the right person," Robert affirmed. "No one understands what you've developed better than you do." "But I've never presented to business people, only to students," Sarah said. "It's the same thing. You'll just be teaching to a different audience," Robert encouraged. "When would it be?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "Next week. I can invite some investors too, if you accept," Robert suggested. "Investors?" Sarah repeated, frightened. "People who could finance the development of your idea," Robert explained. "If they like it, we could turn your methodology into our next big product." Sarah fell silent, thinking about the possibilities. "Would you be with me?" she asked. "I would, but the presentation would be yours," Robert clarified. "I need to think," Sarah said. "Of course. Think it over carefully and give me an answer by tomorrow," Robert requested. That night, Sarah called Brittany to ask for advice. "What kind of question is that?" Brittany said. "Of course you should accept." "But I'll get nervous, I'll forget everything, I'll make a fool of myself," Sarah lamented. "No, you won't. You're smart. You know the subject better than anyone, and you have Robert supporting you," Brittany listed. "What if I mess up?" Sarah insisted. "What if you succeed?" Brittany countered. "Sarah, this could be the chance of a lifetime." "How so?" "If the investors like your idea, you could become rich," Brittany explained. "Isn't that what Robert said about profit sharing?" "He did, but I didn't really understand it," Sarah admitted. "Then ask him tomorrow, and accept the proposal," Brittany advised. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "Absolutely. And you know why?" Brittany said. "Why?" "Because you've already been through the worst. If you manage to survive living in a car with a baby, you can survive a presentation," Brittany reasoned. "When you put it like that, it makes sense," Sarah agreed. "Everything in your life is getting better. It's not a time to be afraid, it's a time to take a risk," Brittany encouraged. The next day, Sarah looked for Robert first thing. "I accept doing the presentation," she said, determined. "That's great," Robert celebrated. "I'll organize everything." "But I need to understand this profit-sharing story better," Sarah said. "Oh, yes. Come here. I'll explain it to you," Robert called her into his office. "If our company develops a product based on your methodology, and that product makes a profit, you receive a percentage of that profit," he explained. "What percentage?" Sarah asked. 10%, Robert offered. 10% of what? She wanted to know. "It depends on how much the product sells, but considering our track record, it could be anywhere between $50,000 and $200,000 a year," Robert estimated. Sarah almost fell off her chair. $50,000, she repeated. "At a minimum," Robert confirmed. "If the product is very successful, it could be more." "Wow," Sarah murmured. "That's why it's important that your presentation is good," Robert said. "The investors need to believe in the commercial viability of the idea." "Right," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "I'll prepare." "Do you need help with anything?" Robert offered. "I need appropriate clothes for the occasion," Sarah admitted. "No problem. The company can cover a business suit," Robert said. "Really?" Sarah asked. "Really. It's an investment in our presentation," Robert justified. That afternoon, Sarah left work early to buy appropriate clothes. She chose a black skirt and blazer set, a white blouse and low-heeled shoes. It was the first time she had dressed like an executive, and she liked what she saw in the mirror. Over the weekend, she dedicated herself to preparing the presentation. She organized slides, rehearsed her speech, anticipated possible questions. Ethan played beside her while she worked. On Monday, the day of the presentation, Sarah woke up earlier than usual. She took a long shower, got ready carefully, dropped Ethan off at daycare and went to the meeting room. "Are you ready?" Robert asked. "I think so," Sarah replied, nervous. "It's going to be fine," he assured her. The investors arrived punctually. 3 well-dressed middle-aged men who looked like they were there to do business. Sarah greeted them politely and began her presentation. She talked about her experience as a teacher, about the problems she identified in traditional educational apps, about her skill mapping methodology, and about how it could revolutionize the way math is taught. The investors asked several technical questions, which she answered confidently. They asked about costs, development time, target market. For every question, Sarah had an answer based on her practical experience. At the end of the presentation, one of the investors said, "Dr. Sarah, your proposal is very interesting. We'll analyze it and give you an answer in a week." When the investors left, Robert hugged Sarah. "It was perfect," he said. "Couldn't have been better." "You think so?" Sarah asked, still nervous. "I'm sure. I saw in their eyes that they were impressed," Robert assured her. "And now?" she asked. "Now we wait for the answer," Robert said. The week of waiting was agonizing. Sarah tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to the presentation. What if the investors didn't like it? What if she had said something stupid? What if she missed the opportunity? On Friday, Robert called her into his office with a huge smile on his face. "I have news," he said. "Good or bad?" Sarah asked anxiously. "Great," Robert announced. "The investors approved the project. They're going to invest $500,000 in developing your methodology." "500,000?" Sarah repeated in disbelief. "And there's more." "They want you to be the pedagogical director of the project," Robert added. "Director?" Sarah asked. "That means a salary of $10,000 a month plus the profit sharing we already discussed," Robert explained. Sarah sat down in the chair, dizzy. I don't know if I'm ready for so much responsibility," she said. "You are." "And there's one more thing," Robert said mysteriously. "What?" she asked. "The investors want to expand to other states. If it works here in New York City, they'll take the methodology to the entire country," Robert revealed. "To the entire country?" Sarah repeated. "Your idea could change the way math is taught in the United States," Robert said, emotionally. That night, Sarah celebrated with Brittany at a nice restaurant as she had promised. She told all the news, while Lily played with Ethan in the high chair next to them. "I can't believe that in 1 month you went from the situation you were in to this," Brittany said, moved. "It's like a fairy tale." "But it's not a fairy tale, it's real," Sarah said, still trying to absorb everything. "And the best part is you deserve every penny," Brittany stated. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said. "What?" "If it weren't for that horrible moment at the supermarket, none of this would have happened," Sarah reflected. "That's true," Brittany agreed. "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are the beginning of the best." "Speaking of the supermarket," Sarah said, "how's your job there?" "Same as always," Brittany replied. "Mrs. Gable is still annoying. The pay is still low." "How about working with me?" Sarah offered impulsively. "How so?" Brittany asked, surprised. "I need an assistant, someone I can trust who understands what I'm talking about," Sarah explained. "But I don't understand anything about education," Brittany protested. "You don't need to. You need to understand organization, people, everyday problems," Sarah said. "And you do." "What would the salary be?" Brittany asked, curious. $3,000 to start," Sarah offered. $3,000? Brittany asked, incredulous. "That's double what I make at the supermarket." "So do you accept?" Sarah asked. "I accept," Brittany said, hugging her friend. "Great. You start Monday," Sarah decided. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following months, the project advanced rapidly. Sarah led a team of 15 people, including Brittany, developing what would be the most advanced personalized math teaching system in the country. The work was intense but rewarding. Sarah discovered she had a natural talent for leadership and management, skills she never imagined she possessed. Brittany proved to be an exceptional assistant, organizing Sarah's schedule, mediating conflicts within the team, and keeping everyone focused on the goals. 6 months after the project began, they launched the beta version of the app in 10 pilot schools in New York City. The results were surprising. The students who used the system improved their math grades by an average of 40%. "Sarah," Robert said, entering her new office, much larger than the initial workstation, "I just got a call." "From whom?" she asked without looking up from the reports she was reviewing. "From the Department of Education," Robert said. Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "From the Department of Education," she repeated. "They want to learn about our project," Robert explained. "They're interested in implementing it nationally." "Nationally?" Sarah asked, incredulous. "In all public schools across the country," Robert confirmed. Sarah sat down in the chair, trying to process the information. "What does that mean exactly?" she asked. "It means your methodology could reach millions of American children," Robert said, emotional. "And financially?" Sarah wanted to know. "Financially means you're going to become very, very rich," Robert said, smiling. "How much?" she insisted. "If the government approves the project for national implementation, your share of the profits could reach $2 million per year," Robert revealed. Sarah was silent for a long moment. "2 million," she repeated, whispering. "Per year," Robert confirmed. That night, Sarah met Brittany after work and told her the news. "Oh my God, you're going to be a millionaire," Brittany exclaimed. "I still don't believe it," Sarah confessed. "Yes, you do. And you know what this means?" Brittany asked. "What?" "That you'll never have to worry about money again. Ethan will be able to study at the best schools. You can have whatever house you want, travel wherever you want." Brittany listed. "It's strange to think about that," Sarah said. "Less than a year ago, I was begging for stale bread. And now your idea is going to help millions of children learn math," Brittany finished. "It's too beautiful." 3 months later, Sarah was in Washington, D.C., officially presenting her project to a committee from the Department of Education. It was a solemn room full of officials, very different from the company's informal environment. She wore an impeccable navy blue suit, imported leather shoes, and a leather briefcase with the project documents. Outside, an official car awaited her. It was hard to believe that the same person who had begged for food was there, presenting an educational solution to the federal government. The presentation lasted 2 hours. Sarah explained in detail how the system worked, presented the results from the pilot schools, showed projections of national impact. The officials asked dozens of questions, all answered with precision and confidence. At the end, the Secretary of Education stood up and said, "Dr. Sarah, on behalf of the federal government, I would like to congratulate you on this exceptional work. We will implement your system on a national scale starting next school year." The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears of emotion roll down her face. Back in New York City, she went straight to the company, where the whole team awaited her anxiously. "Everyone," she announced, "we did it." Everyone celebrated. Robert hugged Sarah, Brittany cried with emotion, the programmers clapped. It was everyone's victory. That night, Sarah was in her new apartment, a modern triplex in the Upper East Side she had bought 3 months prior. Ethan, now almost 2 years old, played on the living room rug while she organized the government contract documents. The phone rang. It was Robert. "Sarah, I need to give you some news," he said. "What news?" she asked. "The company has received a buyout offer," Robert announced. "What do you mean?" Sarah didn't understand. "A major technology company wants to buy our company for the rights to your methodology," Robert explained. "How much are they offering?" Sarah asked. $20 million, Robert said. Sarah almost dropped the phone. $20 million, she repeated. "And you, as the creator of the methodology, would be entitled to $5 million, Robert informed. $5 million? Sarah asked, incredulous. $5 million, Robert confirmed. Sarah sat on the sofa, trying to process the information. "And you think we should accept?" she asked. "I think we should think it over. The company is doing very well. Maybe it's better to maintain our independence," Robert offered. "But $5 million, Sarah murmured. "It's a lot of money, but you're already going to earn a lot from the government contracts," Robert reminded her. That's true, she agreed. Want to know my opinion? Robert asked. I do. I think we should refuse. Our company has the potential to be worth much more than that in the coming years, he said. I agree, Sarah decided. Let's stay independent. A year later, Sarah was at an event at New York City's City Hall, receiving an award for her contribution to public education. The mayor called her a heroine of American education. In the audience were Robert, Brittany with Lily, and even Mrs. Gable, the former supermarket manager, who had formally apologized months before. In her speech, Sarah said, 2 years ago, I was just a desperate mother, asking for help in a supermarket. Today, my methodology is being used by 5 million children across the United States. This was only possible because some people believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. She looked at Robert in the audience and continued, Sometimes the most unlikely encounters lead to the most extraordinary destinies. A childhood scar, a shared memory, a gesture of kindness can completely change the course of a life. The auditorium applauded. Sarah concluded, I want to dedicate this honor to all the mothers who are going through hard times, who think there's no way out, who have lost hope. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes that light is closer than we imagine. After the event, in the parking lot, Sarah found Brittany waiting for her. Beautiful speech, Brittany said, hugging her friend. Thank you for being there from the beginning, Sarah replied. Thank you for giving me the chance to be here, Brittany returned. And now what's the next step? Brittany asked. Now we're going to expand to other countries in North America, Sarah revealed. Really? Brittany asked, excited. Really? And you're coming with me, as the Director of International Operations, Sarah offered. Director? Brittany repeated, surprised. You deserve it. These past 2 years have proven you're far more capable than you imagined, Sarah said. What would the salary be? Brittany asked, joking. 15,000, Sarah answered seriously. $15,000, Brittany asked, incredulous. To start, Sarah added. Brittany hugged Sarah again, emotional. You changed my life, she said. You helped save mine, Sarah replied. 2 years later, Sarah's methodology was being used in 12 countries. The company had become one of the world's leading references in educational technology. Sarah was on the cover of Fortune magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. On a Friday afternoon, she was in her office, now occupying an entire floor of a commercial building, when her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. There's a lady here who says she's known you for a very long time, the assistant informed. What's her name? Sarah asked. Dorothy Jenkins, the assistant replied. Sarah stopped everything she was doing. Dorothy Jenkins was the cook at the Riverside Children's Center, the one who had spilled hot water on her and Robert when they were children. Please send her in, Sarah said. Dorothy entered the office, visibly nervous. She was older, with graying hair, but Sarah recognized her immediately. Mrs. Dorothy? She said, standing up to greet her. Sarah. My, how you've grown, Dorothy said, emotional. Please, have a seat, Sarah offered. I'm not sure I should be here, Dorothy said hesitantly. Why not? Sarah asked. Because I've come to apologize for something that happened over 20 years ago, Dorothy confessed. Oh, the scar, Sarah said, showing her arm. You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Dorothy. It was an accident. But I felt guilty to this day, Dorothy insisted. I saw a report about you on television and decided to come find you. How did you find me? Sarah asked. I asked many people until someone gave me the address of your company, Dorothy explained. And how have you been? Sarah wanted to know. Well, retired now, but I wanted to know about you and Robbie, Dorothy said. Robert works with me, Sarah told her. Would you like to see him? May I? Dorothy asked, excited. Sarah called Robert, who arrived 15 minutes later. The reunion was emotional. Dorothy cried upon seeing the two of them, now successful adults. You two were always special, she said. I always knew you'd go far in life. You planted something in our lives without knowing it, Sarah said. How so? Dorothy asked. The scar we have on our arm is what made us recognize each other that day in the supermarket, Robert explained. If it weren't for that, we might never have reunited, Sarah added, And none of this would have happened, Robert concluded. Dorothy was moved. "So that terrible accident served some good purpose?" she asked. "It served to give us a mark that connected us when we needed it most," Sarah said, touching the scar on her arm. Before Dorothy left, Sarah made one final request. "Mrs. Dorothy, would you like to work with us?" "Work? But I'm retired," Dorothy protested. "As a wellness consultant, to care for the children in our daycare while their parents work," Sarah explained. "But I don't have the education for that," Dorothy said. "You have something better than education, experience and love for children," Sarah stated. "What would the salary be?" Dorothy asked timidly. $5,000, Sarah offered. "5,000, Dorothy repeated, incredulous. "My retirement is a minimum wage." "So do you accept?" Sarah asked. "I accept," Dorothy said, moved. "But why are you doing this for me?" "Because you were part of our story," Robert said, "and now you'll be part of our future." 3 years later, the company had become a multinational. Sarah was internationally recognized as one of the world's leading innovators in education. Brittany was the director of operations in 15 countries. Robert had become the majority partner in several other technology companies. At a UN event in New York City, Sarah was invited to speak about how technology can reduce educational inequality in the world. It was the biggest stage of her career. In her speech, she told her story from the beginning. "Ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, I was a single mother living in a car with my baby son. Today, our educational methodology is being used by 50 million children in 25 countries." The audience fell silent, absorbing the transformation described. "This change didn't happen by magic," Sarah continued. "It happened because 3 ordinary people, a supermarket employee, a successful businessman, and a desperate mother, decided they could do something different in that moment." She paused for a moment, emotional. "Poverty is not a character flaw. A lack of opportunity is not a choice. But when we give people the chance to show their potential, extraordinary things can happen." The auditorium rose in applause. After the event, Sarah received offers from 5 different universities to teach, 3 invitations to write books, and 2 offers for documentaries about her story. Back in the United States, she decided to accept only one proposal: to write a book about her educational methodology, on the condition that all profits would be donated to institutions that care for orphaned children. "Why donate everything?" Brittany asked. "Because everything I have today is already more than I ever dreamed of having," Sarah replied. "It's time to give back." The book, Math for Everyone, an Inclusive Learning Methodology, became an international bestseller. It was translated into 15 languages and adopted as a reference in over 100 universities. 5 years after the book's launch, Sarah was invited to become the dean of the first technological education university in the United States. It was a position she had never aspired to, but it represented the ultimate recognition of her work. At the inauguration ceremony, she gave a speech that would be remembered for decades. "Education is not a privilege for the few. It is a right for all. It is not a product to be sold. It is a good to be shared. It is not a competition to be won. It is a mission to be fulfilled." In the audience were Robert, now the Secretary of Education for New York City, Brittany, CEO of the company's American branch, Dorothy, Director of the largest child welfare center in the country, and Ethan, now 8 years old, proud of his mother. 10 years ago, Sarah continued her speech, "I begged for stale bread to feed my son. Today, our methodology feeds young minds all over the world. This transformation was only possible because I firmly believe one thing: there is no impossible future for those who have the courage to dream and work for their dreams." The auditorium erupted in applause that lasted 5 minutes. After the ceremony, at the celebratory dinner, Robert made a toast. "To Sarah, who taught us that the most unlikely encounters can lead to the most extraordinary destinies." "And to second chances," Brittany added. "And to the proof that every scar tells a story of overcoming," Dorothy completed. "And to the future," Ethan said, raising his glass of juice. Sarah looked at the people around the table, her chosen family, built from a moment of desperation in a supermarket, and felt a profound gratitude. To the love that transforms lives, she toasted finally. 10 years later, Sarah was at an international education conference in Paris, being honored with the Educational Personality of the Decade award. Her methodology had revolutionized mathematics teaching worldwide, reducing failure rates by 60% in the countries where it was implemented. During the press conference after receiving the award, a journalist asked, "Professor Sarah, what was the decisive moment in your career?" She smiled, unconsciously touching the small scar on her arm. "It was the day I begged for stale bread for my son in a New York City supermarket," she answered. "There I learned that dignity is not in never needing help, but in having the courage to ask for it when necessary." "And what is your message for people going through difficulties similar to those you faced?" another journalist asked. "Don't give up," Sarah replied firmly. "Believe that every difficulty is temporary, but the lessons we learn from it are permanent, and that sometimes the greatest transformation of our lives is waiting just after our most difficult moment." Upon returning to America, Sarah was greeted at the airport by hundreds of former students, teachers, and people who had benefited from her initiatives. It was an emotional crowd carrying banners and singing. Ethan, now 18 and about to enter university to study computer engineering, was in the front row. "Mom," he said, hugging her, "I always knew you were special, but now the whole world knows it too." "Thank you, son," Sarah said, moved. "Everything I did was thinking about the future I wanted to build for you, and you ended up building a better future for millions of children," Ethan replied. That night at home, Sarah was sorting through some old boxes when she found the crumpled $10 bill she had tried to use to buy bread 10 years earlier. She had kept it as a memento of the hard times. She looked at the bill, then at the photograph from the ceremony in Paris on the table beside her, and smiled. In 10 years, she had gone from $10 in her pocket to a net worth of over $20 million. But more important than the money were the millions of lives she had touched. The phone rang. It was Brittany. "Sarah, have you seen the news?" she asked excitedly. "What news?" Sarah wanted to know. "A study came out showing that the children using our methodology are scoring 40% better in math than the national average," Brittany informed her. "Really?" Sarah asked, moved. "And there's more. The Department of Education wants to expand it to all subjects," Brittany added. "To all?" Sarah repeated. "English, science, history, geography. They want you to develop a complete methodology," Brittany explained. "Wow," Sarah murmured. "That means at least 3 more years of intense work. Are you willing?" Brittany asked. Sarah looked again at the $10 bill in her hands. "I am," she replied, determined. "We still have a lot of work to do." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 2 years later, Sarah had developed a complete teaching methodology covering all elementary school subjects. The impact was even greater than before. The schools that adopted the full system saw their academic standards index scores increase by an average of 70%. The success drew international attention. Sarah was invited to implement her methodology in countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and even America. One Tuesday morning, she was at her new headquarters, a 5,000 square meter educational complex, when she received an unexpected call. "Professor Sarah?" said a woman's voice on the other end of the line. "Yes. Who is this?" Sarah replied. "This is the Nobel Foundation. We would like to speak with you about a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize," the woman informed her. Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "Nobel Prize?" she repeated, incredulous. "Yes. Your contribution to reducing educational inequality in the world has been deemed worthy of consideration for this year's award," the woman explained. I don't know what to say," Sarah murmured. "You don't need to say anything now. We will send the necessary forms and we'll be in touch again," the woman said. When she hung up the phone, Sarah sat in silence for several minutes, trying to process what she had just heard. Nobel Prize. It was something she hadn't even imagined in her wildest dreams. She immediately called Robert. "You won't believe what just happened," she said. "What?" Robert asked. "I got a call from the Nobel Foundation," Sarah told him. For what? Robert wanted to know. To invite me to be considered for the Nobel Peace Prize, Sarah revealed. On the other end of the line, total silence. Robert, are you there? Sarah asked. I am. I'm just trying to believe what you just said, Robert said, emotional. I can't believe it either, Sarah confessed. Sarah, do you remember where we were 15 years ago? Robert asked. How could I forget? She replied. From a mother asking for stale bread to a possible Nobel laureate, Robert said. It's the most unbelievable story I've ever lived. And you were part of every step, Sarah reminded him. We were part of it. All of us, Robert corrected. That evening, Sarah organized a dinner at her home to share the news with the most important people in her life. Ethan, Brittany with Lily, now 12 years old, Dorothy and Robert. Everyone, she announced during dessert, I have some news to share. Everyone paid attention. I've received an invitation to be considered for the Nobel Peace Prize, Sarah said simply. For a moment, absolute silence. Then everyone began talking at once. Mom, I'm so proud, Ethan said, hugging her. Sarah, this is unbelievable, Brittany exclaimed. My girl, I always knew, Dorothy said with tears in her eyes. You deserve it, Robert stated, smiling. But regardless of whether I win or not, Sarah said, I want you all to know that everything I've achieved is because of you, because each one of you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And you taught us to believe in ourselves too, Brittany replied. True, Dorothy agreed. When you offered me that job, you gave me back the dignity I had lost. And when you showed me your methodology, you reminded me why I wanted to work in education, Robert added. And when you fought for me when I was still a baby, you taught me that I should never give up, Ethan finished. Sarah looked around the table at these people who had become her family and felt a profound gratitude. Do you know what's the most incredible thing about this whole story? She asked. What? Everyone wanted to know. It's that it started with a desperate search for food and turned into nourishment for millions of minds, Sarah said. It's beautiful when you put it like that, Lily said, speaking for the first time during dinner. That's life, Sarah replied, smiling at the girl. Sometimes the most beautiful things are born from the most difficult moments. 6 months later, Sarah was in Oslo, Norway, wearing a navy blue evening gown, seated in the front row of the Nobel Prize auditorium. Her heart was racing as she awaited the announcement of the winner. This year's Nobel Peace Prize, announced the committee chairman, goes to Sarah Jenkins from the United States for her extraordinary contribution to reducing educational inequality in the world and for proving that education is the most effective path to building peace among peoples. The auditorium erupted in applause. Sarah stood up, moved, still not believing it was happening. She walked onto the stage, received the medal, and approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice trembling with emotion, this prize is not mine. It belongs to all the children who didn't give up on dreaming despite the difficulties. It belongs to all the teachers who continue to believe in the transformative power of education. It belongs to all the mothers who fight every day to give their children a better future. She paused, moved, looking into the audience where Ethan, Robert, Brittany, Lily, and Dorothy were seated. 16 years ago, I was just one of the millions of mothers fighting poverty in the world, she continued. Today I'm here not because I am special, but because I was lucky enough to find people who believed in my potential when I myself did not believe. Tears began to roll down her face. This prize is proof that there are no worthless people. There are only people without opportunities, she said firmly. The audience rose in applause that lasted 10 minutes. After the ceremony, at the official dinner, Sarah made a toast. To education, which is the only truly peaceful revolution, and to the people who turn casual encounters into extraordinary destinies. 2 years after the Nobel, Sarah decided to take an even bigger step. She announced the creation of the Global University for Inclusive Education, an institution that would offer free online courses for teachers worldwide. What is the goal? A journalist asked during the launch. Democratizing pedagogical knowledge, Sarah answered. We want to train 1 million teachers in 5 years. How will you fund this? Another journalist wanted to know. With 50% of my personal fortune, Sarah announced. The news caused a worldwide impact. Sarah was donating $10 million to create a free university. Why this decision, they asked. Because education is not a business, it's a mission, she replied, and the time has come to share everything I've learned. The university was inaugurated 1 year later, with courses in Portuguese, Spanish, English, and French. In the first year, it had 100,000 enrolled students. In the third year, 500,000. In the fifth year, the goal of 1 million was surpassed. There were 1,200,000 teachers studying on the platform. On a Sunday morning, 10 years after winning the Nobel, Sarah was at her home playing with her grandchildren. Ethan had gotten married and given her 2 grandchildren, when the phone rang. "Professor Sarah?" said a young voice. "Yes," she answered. "My name is Mary Catherine. I'm a math teacher at a rural school in West Virginia," the young woman said. "Hi, Mary. How can I help?" Sarah asked. "I just wanted to thank you," Mary said, emotional. "I took your course at the Global University 2 years ago. Since then, my classes have improved 70% in their math scores." "That's so wonderful to hear," Sarah said, smiling. "But it's not just that," Mary continued. "I wanted to tell you something. Last week, a mother came to the school asking if there was any work she could do to pay for her son's education. She was desperate, with no money for anything. Sarah paid attention, curious to know the ending. "And I remembered your story, Professor. How you were helped when you needed it most," Mary said. "So I offered her a part-time job as a cleaning assistant, with a salary that would allow her to support herself and keep her son in school." "And did she accept?" Sarah asked. "She did, and she thanked me in tears," Mary recounted. "She said that for 3 months she had been living in her car with her son." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The story was almost identical to her own. "Mary," she said, "are you sure you did the right thing?" "Absolutely," Mary replied. "Because I learned from you that education isn't just what we teach in the classroom. It's what we do with people's lives. And this mother, how is she now?" Sarah wanted to know. "Working hard, taking care of her son, studying at night to finish high school," Mary reported. "And do you know what she told me yesterday?" "What?" "That she wants to be a teacher too. To help other children like her son was helped," Mary revealed. Sarah smiled, moved. "Mary, thank you for telling me this story," she said. "Thank you for teaching me that everyone deserves a second chance," Mary replied. After hanging up, Sarah kept thinking about the conversation. Her story had inspired Mary, who had helped another mother, who now wanted to be a teacher to help other children. It was a perfect cycle of transformation. That night, during the family dinner, she told the story to everyone. "See," Ethan said, "your story keeps multiplying." "It's true," Robert agreed. "Every person you inspire ends up inspiring others." "Like a ripple," Brittany observed. "That grows and spreads. And the most beautiful part," Dorothy added, "is that it all started with a humble request for a stale loaf of bread." "And a generous heart that decided to help," Sarah finished, looking at Robert. "Actually," Robert said, "it started much earlier. It started with a smart girl who helped a shy boy with math in an orphanage." "You're right," Sarah agreed. "It started with the bonds we created when we were children." "And that lasted a lifetime," Robert concluded. At 60, Sarah decided to write her memoirs, not to boast but to record that extraordinary transformations are possible, even starting from the most unlikely places. The book was titled From Stale Bread to the Nobel, A Journey of Hope. It became a worldwide bestseller and was adopted as required reading in many schools. On the last page, she wrote, "This is not a story about me. It is a story about the power of second chances, about the importance of education, and about how small acts of kindness can change the destiny of one person and, consequently, of millions of others." If you are going through difficulties, remember, your current situation does not determine your future destiny. If you have the opportunity to help someone, do it. You may be planting the seed of a transformation that will span generations. And if you work in education, never doubt the power you hold in your hands. Every child you teach could become the person who changes the world. Believe, There is no impossible future for those who have the courage to dream and work for their dreams. 5 years later, at 65, Sarah announced her retirement. In her last public lecture, she said, "I dedicated 40 years of my life to education, first as a student, then as a teacher, then as an entrepreneur, then as an educational reformer. It was an extraordinary journey, but the time has come for other people to take the lead." "What is your final message?" a young teacher asked from the audience. Sarah thought for a moment, then replied, "My final message is the same as on the first day. Believe in the transformative power of education, believe in the potential of every child, and never, ever give up on someone who needs a chance." She paused, emotional. "And always remember, today could be the day you meet the person who will change your life, or the day you change someone's life. Be ready for both possibilities." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 15 minutes. Today, 10 years after her retirement, at 75, Sarah lives on a small farm in the countryside of New York City, surrounded by the family she built. Ethan is a successful engineer and father of 4. Robert remains active in public education. Brittany is the CEO of an international educational foundation. Lily became a doctor and works in underserved communities. Dorothy, at 85, still volunteers at daycare centers. Sarah's methodology is now present in 80 countries and has benefited over 200 million children. The Global University for Inclusive Education has graduated 3 million teachers. The impact of her work is immeasurable. Sometimes on Sunday afternoons, when the whole family gathers for lunch, someone always asks, "Grandma, tell the supermarket story again," and Sarah tells it. Each time she recounts it, she adds new details, new reflections, new lessons, because she understood that her story is not just hers. It is a story of hope that belongs to everyone who believes it is possible to change the world one life at a time. And she always ends it the same way. That's why, my dears, never judge someone by their appearance or situation. Never believe someone has no worth, and always be ready to help those in need. Because you never know when you are standing before the next person who can change the world. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this moving story of overcoming adversity? Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever experienced or know someone who has been through a similar situation. Do you believe small acts of kindness can truly transform lives? We would love to read your honest opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one.